Hi, welcome to another episode of Expat Experts. I'm Samara Iqbal, this is Alexandra Lima. We've got a really special guest today called Laurence Black. So his title is TEP, which stands for Trust and Estate Practitioner. So he came to Dubai in '94, but that was before when he was doing wealth management in Guernsey. He moved to Dubai, he started working with RBC Global Private Banking, and he's been dealing with high net worth individuals since then, dealing with wealth management and multi-jurisdictional estate planning. Now Laurence is currently a director of EMEA. I don't know if I can pronounce this properly. Is it how do you say it?
Asiacitiy Trust.
Asiacitiy Trust Group, which is a very big multi-jurisdictional fiduciary firm. So he'll talk to us a bit more about that. And he's been head of also, he works for another major international financial institution in DIFC, which is Dubai International Financial Centre. He also, in 2004, was the founding chairman of STEP Arabia. So STEP stands for Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, and now, and he is an NPIO in the DIFC. So what does NPIO stand for?
Sure, that's a non-profit organisation.
Right.
So that's how STEP is established here.
So Laurence is still very much involved with STEP Arabia. They have lots of events in Dubai. So we now want to get involved and find out more about his role. And one of my first questions to you, Laurence, is, just to find out more, is just the knowledge of all these changes in the industry affecting cross-border wealth management issues. How do you deal with it? Because you've been here for a span of nearly 30 years.
Sure, absolutely, and it's changed beyond recognition.
Wow.
There's no doubt about that. Dubai wasn't much more than a village, really, when I arrived, with 3 or 4 five-star hotels.
I can imagine,
four-lane dual carriageway to get to Abu Dhabi, and look at it now.
Exactly.
So, and that's changed, and so have the laws and the demographics of people here. It's always a very welcoming jurisdiction, but in those days it was seen as a hardship posting. But many of us would actually be based here to cover the wider region. So I spent my first 5 years, in fact, spent 365 nights in Saudi Arabia. So most of my clients were actually based in Saudi Arabia.
Wow. This is when you were doing private banking at the beginning?
Yes, yeah. Also, obviously, dealing with the high net worth cross-border planning as well. But in those days it wasn't.
You're like one of the first ones just to kind of start and take that step in kind of private banking, wealth management in '94.
Yes.
Gosh, that's really impressive.
Thank you. It's been a long journey and an interesting one. The way that the market has developed here, and the availability of advice as well, has changed dramatically. One of my favourite lines is back then when there was only a handful of advisors really in the region, trusted international advisors at least. You would do business with 8 out of 10 people you met, and the 2 people you didn't actually assist were people that you couldn't actually do anything for, and you just simply refer them to somebody else. And that advice usually had to be taken offshore, and wasn't available here, which again is another thing that has developed and changed here with the development of the financial centres. You mentioned the Dubai International Financial Centre. We were here at the very beginning of that. That was sand when I arrived here. Again, it's
that's fantastic. Well, the DIFC, how they operate, is really good.
Yes, and ADGM. Obviously, we've got other financial centres.
We're ADGM. Yeah. Yes, of course.
Yes, and so a lot more local solutions are available now, and increasingly so.
So I had a question in terms of. In your role, how do you approach advising clients, and how do you assist them with wealth planning for their assets in the UAE?
Sure. Good question. Obviously, the understanding and knowing your client is the most important thing.
Sure.
So, and that I'd like to think has hopefully got a little easier. It's still not the easiest thing, because people often come here, they're often quite reserved talking to people about their finances. But our role as trusted advisor is to gain that trusted advisor status in order to get them to disclose all the information that we need to know. What you don't want to find out is, having put a cross-border, trust and estate planning solution in place, and then to find out 2 years later that there's actually a US, passport tucked away in a safe somewhere, which completely changes the premise of the advice that's been given.
Are clients quite open, or do you have to really go digging?
Again, digging, I would say, it depends culturally. It's understanding the culture, the region, which questions you can ask certain people, how many times you're going to have to meet.
Different nationalities.
Yes, and that's another advantage and beauty of the region. But at the same time, coming here with one solution for all is simply not going to work. So understanding the client, not only themselves, the family, where their assets are, and which passports they hold. So that folder, and then once you've got a plan, helping them navigate their way through an ever increasing complicated world, from what might be a new region for themselves, or for indigenous people, it might be that you're advising them on their international assets, where they're less familiar, and these are Muslim, non-Muslim, different nationalities, different cultures.
I was just going to say, I had a follow-up question. You just mentioned international assets. I was wondering what sort of typical structuring options there might be for international assets for the UAE residents.
Yeah, thankfully, that's one of the easier questions, because that's very well tried and tested. I mean, Asiacitiy Trust, represented them now in the region for its 13th year. As you know, I've been here nearly 30 years, and all with large financial institutions, with trust companies in the past. That is a thing of the past. There are very few financial institutions with trust companies now. So I joined the independent world, which I think I was passionate about. So I think that's becoming more appropriate for advising clients. So you're not conflicted in any way. Working with other advisors like yourselves on other aspects of their family arrangements. But so international assets, obviously, when you're coming from common law Western jurisdictions in particular, or have assets in those jurisdictions, these are very tried and tested solutions. So again, understanding the families, putting those in place. We still see an awful lot of people migrating across different borders. So Canada, US, you find, I mentioned US before, but you quite often find US connectivity. There's been a lot of people.
They've got a lot of tax issues that they have to look at, don't they? So you need to, you help a lot of US citizens as well with their tax advice. Is that quite important?
Yes, I'd clarify that a little further in that it's not just citizens, but I would say the US connected persons. So it may be that you're talking to a non-US, but then they find out that they're married to a US person, or they've got a child born in the US, which was by design because they wanted to give them a good passport, a good education. But what are the consequences of that? And they may not have thought about it. I think it was complete ignorance, quite frankly, in the early days. People simply didn't know that there was a consequence for that. So you spent a lot of time educating. Education's still very important, but so we do find people who don't fully understand that. But understanding the client diversification, putting those in place. There are, particularly if there's you may have come across the foreign grantor trust scenario. So if you've got a US, say, husband or wife, that's married to a non-US person, that the non-US persons could settle a trust which is tax efficient for US beneficiaries. So that's foreign grantor.
Over here you get a lot of obviously non-US people meeting Americans here, getting married.
Yes. So I would say every month we're having a conversation with somebody that's connected to the US. Canada is another. An awful lot of people from the region migrated over time to Canada, continue to do so. And there's some very tried and tested solutions that we've been doing. You mentioned before, I was with Royal Bank of Canada. Back in the Channel Islands, we had a whole floor of people who looked after people Canadian.
So you've got a lot of insight
in
into
Canada
as well.
Yes, so those are two.
Is Canada similar to the UK in any way? Only because it's a Commonwealth, I always ask that.
Yes, safe, secure. Obviously, it's known for that. Security, well-trodden legal system, well-tried and tested, shall I say, and legal system, robust in that sense. And that wasn't the case necessarily for non-Muslims, Western individuals here historically. That has changed, and we can touch on that. But I think, whether it's, I mentioned the US, I mentioned Canada, but obviously the UK as well. People, that's the latest budget is another topic altogether.
Yes.
And that's changing the rules.
It just gets worse, doesn't it?
It's different. It's different. There's a very interesting
it's a lot.
twist
It's
for.
just, it's a lot going on, but it's
Yeah.
just everyone's always just kind of dreading what's to happen next.
It keeps advisors busy.
Yes.
You asked the question before, Alexander, how do you keep abreast of the, it's keeping abreast of all of these changes, and frankly, I don't think one advisor these days, if you're looking at an entrepreneurial family.
But because of these, Laurence's, these budgets and the tax issues, obviously lots of expats or lots of British people, for example, let's give an example, they want to move out to the UAE. What kind of advice, and I'm sure you meet lots of people that have moved across or thinking of moving across to relocate, how would you prepare them financially for the move? For example, if they want to invest in real estate, advice that you would give, what they should watch out for, what kind of factors would you say to them are important so they can prepare financially?
Well, you used the most important word there. I think it's preparing and preparation. As welcoming as the UAE can be, it is a completely different jurisdiction when it comes to living here from a legal perspective. So now you'll need advice to navigate your way through that. But prior to coming, making sure that that you're going to have access to that kind of good professional advice, both exit from where you're coming from. I'm sure you see that, in your role from time as much as I do, frankly. But so the exit can be as important as the entry into here.
Divorce and separation, one wants to leave. Yeah.
So understanding the differences in the law, where you might be exposed, speak to the right people, make sure they're properly qualified, and also able, make sure they've got a network of appropriate people, which we now have those people available in the UAE. But back to your original question, I think it's a good British saying, but get your ducks in a row. Getting your financials ahead. Be prepared that you will need, despite the opportunities that the UAE brings, that rent here often has to be paid in advance, so you need to come here. You need to come here prepared, probably to see yourself through the first year, despite the fact that you've got a very attractive job that seems to be tax-free and a disposable income on a monthly basis. But there is a cost to establishing yourself here, so that would be the first thing. And then placing children into schools and the commitment to that and the cost and everything else. One thing that I think an awful lot of people is preparing a pack of legalised documents that you will require when you come into the UAE.
That's a headache.
Yeah, we deal with that often.
So and a lot of you find a lot of people have come here.
Kind of marriage certificate,
exactly.
But you'll need them all.
You do.
You'll need them all. So
it's
even after
when they've got it done already. Visas,
yes. So I think a lot of that. A lot of people, fortunately, they're using some good firms here, dealing with executive relocation.
I had to get the law degree, the practice certificate, everything.
Well, I think you still do. You still do. So when you're renewing your visa, and I've renewed mine a good number of times. But you still need to have all of these documents.
So like getting your ducks in a row.
So getting your ducks in a row.
So if they obviously came to you and said, we want to invest in real estate, again, what would you tell them to watch out for?
Real estate, location.
So
Again, come here.
Buy now.
Find out where you're going to be working. Obviously, find out where your children are going to be going to school. Probably renting to begin with, so you find your way around the town, see your way around the market. But once you've invested from a financial planning perspective, then do you want to own that in your personal name? Is there depending on the value of the property, depending on your own circumstances, Muslim, non-Muslim.
Do you kind of make a plan for them once you find out what they want?
Yes, so putting, navigating your way through that and putting a plan together. I like to often refer to it with clients as a roadmap, and there'll be junctions in that roadmap. So what ifs this were to happen. So looking at the consequences of the decisions that you might make, the commitments that you're making. But real estate in particular, you'd be looking. I think it's wise to have wills in place for any UAE assets. Obviously, people come here often with their maybe from the UK. They have a UK will or other jurisdictions. Exactly. It won't work here. So take that advice is available through people like ourselves and yourselves included. And then if there's an opportunity for another structure for UAE real estate in particular, the development of DIFC foundations, DIFC, ADGM, even Ras Al Khaimah, you'll hear about. DIFC is probably the most robust when it comes to, I believe, it's not something we do directly, but...
I heard someone talk to me about their foundations.
Yes.
So is it like the waqf, they call it? So it's like they have their own, so DIFC or in the UAE they have something called a waqf, which is like a foundation. So it's like a trust.
Trust,
basically.
yes.
So is that kind of a new concept, or has it been around for a while? So one of the local lawyers mentioned this to me, so that's why I'm asking.
Yes, so the waqf, I think if we have an attempt at pronouncing
so it's kind of, it's not really putting in a trust, but you're not using Sharia law, essentially.
Correct. Well,
you can.
That is historically, and there is an argument, and you'll hear from historians that this was actually the first type of trust.
Provisional one, yeah.
So provisional trust under Islamic law, and a duty to protect and care for the assets for the next generation. So in simple terms, and that's really what a trust is about. It's separating legal ownership, from yourself to a trust or a vehicle.
So is this kind of like where families own a lot of wealth, or companies, or properties, they can put it into this foundation, basically? So it's a whole other topic, but it is my special area. So waqf, I can honestly say I've never actually put one in place, because that's very much a very specialist area, and it is Islamic assets with Muslims, but it's the trusts. Yes. But what we refer to is trusts are available internationally in the jurisdictions. And obviously we recommend you as well, because when we've got clients who ask us about trusts, we don't have a clue, so you need to speak to someone about potentially looking at your options.
So you've got, but for our clients, you would generally be looking at trusts either internationally, whether it's Singapore. We've got operations in different jurisdictions, from New Zealand, Singapore, the Cook Islands for asset protection. We've got, and then obviously the Channel Islands is another popular jurisdiction from a Western expat perspective. Singapore, I think, for connectivity for service, actually is better aligned to this region, and I've been representing Singapore along with Hong Kong and the other more Asian jurisdictions.
Quite a lot as well?
I think culturally they're more aligned. It can be. So there's one aspect. So you've got those for mostly international assets, but if you're looking at local assets, and why I mentioned foundations, the financial centres of ADGM, DIFC. And say Ras Al Khaimah as well, do have foundation legislation within their jurisdiction. So that is, so you have onshore, which would be a waqf, in your area you've got the family status law, which came in 2023, which gives more stability and recognition to non-Muslims settling assets. The same is happening now for the equivalent of an international trust can be established within the DIFC, the ADGM, and recognising common law, which is an important factor, and therefore suitable for Muslims and non-Muslims actually. But care needs to be taken in the drafting of those, taking proper legal advice.
Quite a lot involved, isn't there?
Yes, So in terms of sort of a snapshot of how you would advise someone to protect their assets, for example, in the UAE. I know you've already mentioned a few important elements, but what sort of short pieces of advice would you give to someone who just came to you and said, I want to protect my assets? What should I be looking at doing? What should I be more aware of?
So managing those assets and taking advice on, so understanding and sitting down with somebody as to what the family circumstances are, where the assets are. what their concerns might be. They're
Yeah.
obviously objectives. We get a lot of people coming to us, frankly, looking to say we want asset protection. And the first question I always ask is, what is the purpose of the protection?
Yeah.
And it may be that just thinking of settling these assets for the next generation, they're worried
What
about,
are their goals?
could be family conflict, it could be
Okay.
internal, it could be external factors,
Could be looking to
geopolitical,
divorce.
could be looking for divorce,
Yeah.
and certainly that's, I think some of the conversations we've had,
Mm.
the first thing, which I think I recall saying to you, is to, if there's a case already opened, it's too late, generally.
Sure.
The other aspect is, some courts will look through a trust for such settlements. It's thinking ahead, whether it's prenups, asset protection, looking for estate planning, and then considering the other consequences such as tax and,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
Sharia
no,
and non-Sharia.
No,
And
that's
it's
helpful.
local kind of succession law, because obviously you said you when it comes to wills, you pass it on to someone to draft the will. So local succession law, how does that affect an individual's assets if they're developed or they're established in the UAE? Does that kind of make a difference to your advice, or does that help? Do you have
Yes.
to
Yes. Yeah, no, the simple answer is it would. And that, fortunately, that's something that has changed significantly to add to the advantages or the attraction, really, and the advantages of being based here in the UAE, because of the family. It's a federal law that has been brought in, the personal.
Exactly,
So both within the financial centres, where you're relying on common law legislation, and that's a more reliable outcome. Some would say. Onshore, if you're a non-Muslim and you have assets based in the UAE, now we have available, and I can't recall the exact time when that law came in, but 2023 is the latest onshore family status
your
law.
advice has changed over the years, hasn't it?
It has.
Like
It has.
DIFC obviously established itself once you were here, so you've
Yes.
gone through so much, and now it's changed recently after COVID, so there's a lot.
It has,
Yeah.
and actually, there's something interesting comes to mind there when you say over the years. But I would say historically, and up until, and it's still true with some clients today, that they would keep a lot of their assets offshore. But certainly in the last 5+ years, so 5 years certainly, people are more confident about keeping their assets here. The banking system's become much more sophisticated in that sense. We have a lot more international banks represented, as well as the local banks diversifying their offerings. So people are more confident in keeping their assets here. Financial, the owning real estate wasn't, again, when I first came here, it was simply unheard. Nobody would even contemplate that. So that is something. This is relatively new. When the country is, when we're looking at a country of 50 years, and I've been here for best part of 30 of those, but and it's changed beyond recognition.
But it's nice to see it kind of develop and work as it grows and it expands as well. So
Yes,
I like that as well.
Absolutely, and it becomes, we're seeing more and more people moving here.
Of course, it's just more attractive to people.
Yes.
Especially when they're kind of just stuck and they see kind of a better life, they're more drawn to it.
Yes.
I think it's human nature as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think maybe we'll ask sort of a final question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So what we were asking for is, if obviously people listening to you, Laurence, with your experience, what kind of advice or tips do you think our listeners would get from your experience? What would you want to tell them, like some pearls of wisdom, things to look out for, things that you would do differently if you were coming, things that you would watch out for, like any kind of advice for our listeners that you want to share?
Sure. Well, it's a positive experience. That's what I've certainly had from here. And it's been great for me from a family perspective, first and foremost, over the years. We've enjoyed that. I would encourage people to certainly embrace everything, the multicultural. Why are you coming here? Obviously there are other reasons with work, and historically it was oil and gas that brought people here. Number one, and then that's diversified into right across the board now. But come here, don't spend all your time on the strip or in the financial centre or in Business Bay. Get out and see the country, explore not only Dubai and the UAE but the wider region. That would be one of my top tips, because there is an awful lot out there if you scratch underneath the surface culturally to enjoy and understand. And our children going back have made they've gone back different, different people, more culturally aware.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I've noticed that with expat kids, they're just
Yeah.
more well-rounded.
Yes. So
Yeah.
enjoy that. Financially, there are. I think the traps are getting caught in the fast lane.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've kept a balance, trying to make sure you've got that balance of life. That you are still, it's certainly. I don't have children here anymore, and I watch other families, and they do seem to be a little bit more dispersed than we used to be, and so we're a close family unit. I think keeping that and creating it, making the most of that opportunity, being in a relatively small geographic space is good. And then, take advice. Make sure you take advice on the financial planning side, and it'd be too easy to just be spend. You've got this disposable income every month. You need to plan from day one. Why did you come here in the first place? What are your objectives?
Some people just kind of think about it when they're going through something like with us, like a breakup or something else. They don't kind of think about it, but it's important if they've been having a family or they, long term as well, what their goals are. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Where do we want to? At what point are we going to educate our children? You can educate children all the way through to graduation here now. That certainly wasn't the option when I first moved here, and children would often go off to boarding school. Often the wives would go back with the children. Those are still options, but it's less the norm now. And people are here enjoying the not only Dubai but the region, I would encourage them to embrace that and make the most of their time here, but at the same time be clear on their goals and get some good advice to save.
It's been really, really beneficial, even for us, to listen to kind of things that you've said, and there's so much there that we probably could talk about for longer and longer, but it's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much. It's a pleasure. Good to see you both.
Sharing this with our listeners, sharing your details as well if they do want to get in touch as well.
Pleasure.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.